Welcome everyone to the meeting of the Atheist Society on the 14th of March 2024. The topic for tonight is Arab prophet, fact or fiction, ? I have given this lecture before to a secular conference. It was hosted by a secular party called Leaving Your Religion, Ex-Muslims Speak Out. And for some reason, it didn't go down very well with ex-Muslims because, and ex-Muslims, the prophet is a key feature to their religion. And even if you've left their religion, you still want there to be a prophet, because the prophet, having had 6 wives, and including the 6-year-old Aisha, and committed all the heroic deeds that he did, people like to have that kind of figure to either adore or to pillory. But I have to be a little bit of put a little bit of a damper on that, because I think the evidence suggests very strongly that the whole entire story of the alleged person called Muhammad is complete fiction, and the degree with which it has been, the myth has been created, is quite extreme. It's as if the Christian religion says that instead of riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, Jesus actually rode into Jerusalem on a horse with a sword and conquered it, all and sundry. And well, if Christianity claims that, we would know for sure that it didn't happen. However, Islam claims such a thing, but history shows, as I will elaborate, it didn't happen. And considering the magnitude of the fiction, it's quite astounding. So I want to, first of all, just reflect a little bit on nature of religions and all other sorts of beliefs and why people believe them. Obviously, one thing is your ethnic heritage or your socialization. Obviously, people believe the religion that they were told as kids to believe. Most people do. But it's a little bit more than that, because people feel loyalty to a religion even if they don't believe it. It's a kind of ethnic loyalty that, you know, everyone's got their religions are all misinformation to describe religion. I think that there's the difference between misinformation and disinformation is that misinformation is something that people say, or they post, or they repeat without knowing that it's false. Disinformation is something that people say knowingly that it's false. Now, if you want to look at the evidence, you can find out that these things are false, but people don't. The historical writings on the origins of Islam changed quite dramatically, starting around, or particularly around the year 2010, when there's a whole lot of books came out, and I'll go through them, I'll describe them, that reflect on the actual evidence of what happened, not the religious that tends to describe what happened. Before I do that, I just want to have a little aside on this question of why people believe stuff. It's kind of getting worse. I think we're going backwards. If you look at the past, there's great works of English literature that criticized religion. George Fraser, The Golden Bough, went into enormous detail describing how all religions arose. You've got Thomas Paine writing before the American Revolution, totally condemning religion, and he suffered from it for it. But because people knew he was speaking the truth, but didn't want to listen. So when they're going back 200 years, people have been debunking religion. But now, not only is religion resurgent, well, in many ways, in many parts of the world, but the ability to criticize it is diminishing. And I want to say something, a little bit comment on what I think is identity politics. Identity politics is the notion that people who identify with a particular ethnic group or some other type of group, and they, particularly if it's a minority, and they claim protection from any sort of discrimination based on their minority status. Well, that's fine, but don't expect that people to believe your myths, but they do. So identity politics is fine, but when it comes to distortions of the truth, we have to object. We have to say something. We have to contradict it. So I've had this experience, and it doesn't make you very popular. I've criticized Islam before, and you get all sorts of criticism because you're racist because you criticize Islam. I mean, it's just ridiculous, of course, because it's not a race. People expect protection from criticism. It's not just religions, it's all sorts of beliefs. I'll just recount one incident. I was in New Zealand. I came back yesterday and I had a fantastic time in Queensland. Good on you, Kiwis. it's a great place. And I went to the Kiwi Park where they breed kiwis for reintroduction because of threatened species. And it was great. They had scientific information about the birds and the trees and all that. And then they had an exhibit about the New Zealand greenstone. And you press a button on the audio, and Maoris believe the greenstone has magical powers. And then it goes on to say some person who wasn't a Maori claimed that he had been cured by this stone. And so I think, oh no, when I give back the audio, I've got to make some comment about that. So when I went back, there's no one there, and there's three women there, and I said, look, I just want to pass on to you some feedback that, and I said, the greenstone doesn't have magical powers, and it doesn't cure people, and what you say in your audio is disinformation. Well, I can tell you they didn't, that comment wasn't well received. I was, accused of not respecting. I was only my belief, and actually, all stones have energy. They were three of the comments that I got, and then they said, thank you, sir. Have a nice day." So, but anyway, I made the point. So I think whenever I see that, I think I have to say something. I've already made the point in another lecture that the same thing goes for Aboriginal Dreamtime beliefs. People are entitled to have their creation stories. They're not entitled to claim them as true. Aborigines didn't derive from native animals. They came on boats like everyone else, which is actually something, because there was never a land bridge to Australia. They all came on boats. So that's the scientific origin. Why can't we respect it? Just to continue on this theme, it's not just that I'm picking on Islam. I'll pick on, first of all, Christianity. I don't think there's any justification at all to suggest that there may have been a person called Jesus, but not Jesus of the Bible. When Richard Dawkins was here, he was debating with Cardinal Pell on Laidline, and Pell said, "Oh, Adam and Eve is a myth." Fair enough, it's a myth. But if Cardinal Pell says Adam and Eve is a myth, then where do you draw the line? It's all a myth. And historically, the figure Adam was a recreated myth. They're not historical figures. And there's an archaeologist called Israel Finkelstein who's totally debunked all of the Jewish Torah. Only the first 6 of the Bible are all complete myth. And the problem is that it's creating havoc in the world because people believe that God gave them a land and they're entitled to it. And they're entitled to get rid of all the other people that live there. And that's what they're doing. And that's creating so much trouble in the world today because people believe these myths. And I'm just saying that we have to contradict them, not have to force people to become atheists, but let them think. So anyway, that's the background to this, why I've come to this. Now, I did all the work for this more than 10 years ago. I spent about 2 years doing a lot of research into history of Islam. I read many books, some of them about this thick. And I went into it in great detail, and I wrote some papers, and they were not published. They wouldn't publish them. I tried a few different publications, and so I was discouraged, but people don't want to know. And all of the books that I refer to, people totally disregard them. What you see here is a picture of the heroic Arab prophet, conquering hero. And I found this on Google, and I won't say where I found it, because you're not allowed to show pictures of the Arab prophet. Let's move on to, okay, here is a map, and this is 600 AD. Now, the prophet is alleged to have been a conquering hero in the year 622. Well, that was the start of the calendar, which I'll come to. This is the known state at the time. The Roman Empire here, Constantinople. Oh, Constantinople's here. What? Is that it there? Oh, that's the center of the Byzantine Empire. Okay. I want to refer back to the previous lecture I did, which was on Jesus Wars, which was a book by Philip Jenkins. Now, at the year 600, Christianity had been apparently going for 600 years. But at least the last 300 years before this have been continually fighting about the nature of the Trinity, monosophites and the Trinitarians, and the endless wars about the nature of Jesus. And eventually, the people in the East over here were sick of it. But Christianity had spread. It had spread down here into Egypt, and it has spread east over here into the Persian Empire. But at this time, you had these kingdoms, Ghassanids and the Lakhmids. They were Arab Christian kingdoms. They had kings, and we know the names of the kings. They were Christian, and they acted as border guards for the Romans, cures. And the significance of the word cures is that the alleged Muhammad came from a tribe, alleged cures, but the actual derivation of the word cures was they were border guards for the Persians. And at this time, the Persian emperor was married to a Christian, and Christianity had all but taken over the Persian Empire. And the king followed Zoroastrianism, but basically Christianity had spread far and wide in the East. But the key thing is that these were Arab kingdoms. The Arab Christians were already there. Okay, here's what we know happened. The Persians conquered Jerusalem. He conquered Jerusalem and stole the so-called True Cross and Egypt. And he devastated the place and captured people and took them back to Persia, as they typically did. In 622, the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius led his troops into a decisive victory. 622 victory. And he compared himself to Alexander the Great. And a truce was made in 628. Now, those dates are significant because later they were used to become significant dates in the reconstructed Islamic history. Note that there was long-term Christian migrations. Christianity had penetrated east for a long time. Islamic view of events. Okay, here's what happened according to Islamic historians. In 622, Muhammad moves from Medina to Mecca. There's Medina. I think Mecca's down here somewhere. Mecca. And that is called the Hijrah. And that's the start of the Islamic calendar. And it is the start of a calendar, but not the Islamic one. 623, he begins an insurgency against Mecca. And there's a 5-year campaign, battles of Badr, Uhud, the Battle of the Trench, and there's the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and it corresponds with the same date as the Byzantine Sassanid Treaty. And 630, the conquest of Mecca, and then beyond. The story was that Muhammad originally came from Mecca. He started raving about a new religion. They kicked him out and he went to Medina, and then he came back with a conquering army, took over Mecca. Everyone madly adopted his religion, and the new religion of Islam conquered first of all the Arab Peninsula over here, and then spread up into Levant here and into Persia. And then with the will of God, the will of Allah, it spread mightily throughout the West over here. Now, all of that story doesn't come from the Quran. It doesn't come from the Hadith either. It comes from the biography of the Prophet, which was written about 200 years after the so-called events. Here's another map. This is 750, expansion of Islam. Now, that one, it is close to reality because by this time, the religion, which, by the way, was a version of Christianity, then had become, and it was a religion that was definitely opposed to the Roman religion, spread throughout the territories as shown in this map. Whether they call themselves Muslim at that time or Islam. I'm not sure what date that started. Now, why did it spread so fast? It wasn't conquest. It was just the fact that people found it convincing. I'll go into it about what it was, but it was an alternative version of Christianity that avoided all the conflicts about the Trinity, which they'd been fighting over for the last 300 years, and they'd finally found, okay, we don't have to worry about this. Jesus was the messenger, or there's different names, I'll go into it. But I think they adopted it out of relief because they escaped from this continual infighting. Okay, the traditional narrative, prophet came from Mecca, which was a center of trade and pilgrimage. His revelations from Allah via the angel Gabriel are recorded verbatim in the Quran. His military exploits include insurgency, mass beheadings, battles, and conquests. Although this mainly comes from the biography, which goes into incredible detail. It names all the soldiers in the battles by name. Amazing. It goes into his wife, his lives, his 6-year-old wife, but apparently it wasn't consummated until she was 9. His great words and deeds in the Hadith form the basis of Islamic law. Most Muslims are not well informed about the details of the Prophet's life or the Quran. The content of the doctrines motivates some Muslims to violent extremism. Yes, if you want to look at the Islamic State, they classify everything they do by quotes from the Quran. Most Muslims actually are not aware of this. If they go to the mosque, they're not get told that Muhammad was this violent conquering hero. They're told that Muhammad was a great noble peacemaker. But what they say in the mosque and what the Islamic doctrine says is different, and it's also different to what actually happened. Okay, here's the Islamic sources that I referred to. The Quran contains or is derived from Arab Christian liturgical texts. If you read the Quran, you can see some of the surah are like repetitive. They're what you would say in a church, like a chant. So they are sort of records of what people did in this religious services. It's mainly, there's no narrative. It's not like the Bible where there's a whole lot of connections of stories. The Quran is just a mishmash of things and not in any particular order. Moses is mentioned 136 times, Jesus 24 times, little or no mention of Muhammad. Well, if there is, we don't know it's Muhammad. In the Quran, earlier dated texts appear first. Mecca, Medina dating schemes derived from the Sirah. Okay, the Sirah. The Sirah is the biography of Muhammad. Relies on the 9th century publication by Ibn Hisham of Ibn Ishaq's 8th century description. What we have, all of this biography is derived from something from the 9th century, which was remembered by someone who supposedly written in the 8th century and remembered and written down by someone in the 9th century. And it's just full of very specific details, as if someone was there recording it 200 years earlier. Hadith and Sunnah are the words and the deeds of the Prophet. So anything the Prophet did is venerable and worthy. And so we have to remember what he did. What all of these sayings of what the Prophet did are validated because you can refer that, well, somebody told him, somebody before that told him, and so on and so on and so on, and have a whole chain of, a chain of whispers, and it all goes back to someone who apparently was there. So that's the method of validation of the chain. And now, are there any non-Islamic sources that give any confirmation to this legend? No. Doctrina Jacobi, there's a particular people who are documents that are available at the time. John of Damascus. They don't say anything about the legend. What we do know about Damascus in particular is it was a center of learning. The Romans closed down the Greek schools of learning, and the Arabs took all the works of Aristotle to Damascus and translated it into Arabic. And they did a lot of scholarly work. They did algebra. We get the name algebra from Algebra, who did scientific work at the time. And we know we get our alphabet, our number system, which was actually originally came from India. If Damascus had have been Islamic, would they have translated the works of Aristotle into Arabic? I don't think so. They would have burned them. All reason for doubt, all of this information dates from 100, 200 years after the supposed events. None of it accords with contemporary historical records based on non-Islamic sources. There is evidence that Mecca did not exist at the time of the alleged prophet. This is because we know detailed records of the trade routes, and Medina was on the trade routes, but Mecca wasn't. The Quran itself betrays its Judeo-Christian origins because it's just full of Christian references. Events of the Quran can be located Jordan and Palestine and not Arabia. Only 2 of the first 10 Islamic leaders are historically attested. Historians divide between traditionalists, revisionists, historicists, and mythicists. This is a list of dates. The ones in black are from the Islamic doctrine. So after Muhammad, we've got Abu Bakr. He was the second caliph, so-called. And then he was the father of Aisha, 6-year-old Muhammad's wife. After that, we've got Umar, Uthman, Ali, Hassan. Then we come down to Muawiyah in the Islamic history. Now, Muawiyah is a historic figure. He made coins, as I'll show you. He made Christian coins. Then, according to the Islamic doctrine, we've got several other leaders. Then we come to Abd al-Malik in 685 to 705. Significant. So he was the first 2 leaders, really, and then it continues after that. And some of those leaders are historically attested. But let's see what sort of people we know they were historically. Were they Islamic caliphs? No. Let's look at the what early historians have said, starting with 1997. So, I mean, critique of the Islamic history has been going on for a long time. So John Wansborough, he wrote his book, Quranic Studies, 1977. Islam, he said, Islam did not come into being as a new religion on its own, but was derived from conflicts of various Jewish Christian sects. The Quran was written and collected in a long process over 200 years and cannot be attributed to Muhammad. A person of Muhammad would be a later invention. Okay, so that's what he said in 1977. So, I mean, that's a fairly early date for this type of critique. Then you've got Patricia Kroner and Michael Cook's book, Hagerism, The Making of the Islamic World. What they say, historical scholarship on the beginnings of Islam should be based on contemporary historical, archaeological, and philological data, as is done for the study of Judaism and Christianity, rather than Islamic traditions and later Arab writings, because historians just tend to take the Islamic story for granted without criticizing it. So that's why they make the statement that, no, you should look at the evidence. Islam evolved from a blend of Judaism, Samaritanism, and Christianity fashioned from Judaic mythology and symbology. Early mosques have prayer niches oriented to the north, to Jerusalem, rather than to Mecca. Someone made the comment to me that the Grand Mosque in Medina looks like a church before it became a mosque. Same with a lot of the major mosques in Damascus and obviously the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, Istanbul. I'm just going through the nature of the historical narrative and how it's evolved about this on this subject. Trisha Corona did a lot of study of the evidence of the trade routes because you can find documentary evidence of where they went. There's no mention at all of the Quraysh, the tribe of Muhammad. In the narrative, he comes from this tribe. As we saw before, the name actually derives from protectors of the empire, border guards. The trading center Mecca, an examination of all available evidence and sources leads Corona to conclude that Muhammad's career took place not in Mecca and Medina or in the southwest Arabia or at all, but in northwest of Arabia, and she says there was no Mecca at that time. Fred Donner is another notable figure in this field of early origins of Islam. He says that what came to be called Islam began as a monotheistic believers' movement inaugurated by Muhammad, which included righteous Christians and Jews, as well as those monotheists who followed the teachings of the Quran. Only under the rule of Abdul Malik, 685 to 705, Islam began to separate from Christians and Jews. Note, these historians realize that the Islamic narrative is false, but they still refer to Muhammad as a historical figure, which simply doesn't make sense. If the narrative is false, there was no Muhammad in the year 623. Tom Holland has recently been here on a speaking tour. A very good historian. A number of his books. He writes very well. Now this book, The Shadow of the Sword. Holland suggests that Islam, rather than originating in the Arab deserts, was born further north in the borders between Syria and Palestine, a region had long been devastated by plagues and wars, usual precursors of apocalyptic scenarios. Yes, whenever there's a plague or a war or some apocalyptic event, it tends to give rise to a new religion, which that does correspond with the emergence of Islam, what later became called Islam. While researching the book, Holland found that the oldest extant biography of Muhammad was written recently 200 years after he had died, and scholars were unsure how much early Islamic could be considered accurate. So no, we can't consider it to be accurate. Now, he made a film in 2012 called Islam, Untold Story. And you can watch it on YouTube. Just Google it.
Are you Irish? You guys Irish?
He interviewed Trisha and Fred Donner.
Somebody's going to need to
evidence for the origins of Islam. No mention of Muhammad for decades after his death. The city Mecca may not have been the real birthplace of Muhammad and Islam. Much of the story of Islam's origins was later developed in the early years of the Arab Empire. Now, I want to say something else about Tom Holland. Yeah, before we go on.
Somebody new
is a Christian. He said he's a Christian, and he's now joined this group called New Theists, which is a so-called alternative to the New Atheists. And Ayan Hirsi Ali has also joined this. Now, apparently they think that we should be Christian, even though we know it's false. because it's in Islam, or I don't know. I don't know why. What I mentioned at the start. Somehow people know it's wrong, but they still want to believe it. And when Tom Holland is such a great historian, and yet he's coming out with this pro-Christian narrative. I think it's good for people to believe it. No, but how can it be good to believe something that you know is false? I just don't get it. It's telling willful lies. How can it be good? It's just, what is the world coming to where people, authoritative, educated, great historians, want you to believe misinformation? It's not what the world needs now. We need to get rid of all the misinformation. Now, here, we have people that do. There's this school, and they're German scholars, and Germans have a long history of studying early Islam. And they publish in German, but a lot of their books have been translated. Well, it's just like a breath of fresh air because they try to find out what actually happened and try to explain it. So these are some of the books. The History of Islam. It's by Karl-Heinz Ulrich, and two books. One of the notable books, it's not here, is written by Volker Popp, who all of these people read ancient Arabic. Okay, look at the text and read it, and they read other languages. They look at all the original sources. In our institute, it's in Germany, in Saarbrücken. Inara was founded as an incorporated charitable organization in 2007. It tells you the start date of all this authoritative research on the origin of Islam is relatively recent. So the notable people here: Karl-Heinz Ulrich, professor of religious studies and history of Christianity at the University of Saarland, chairman of Inara. I mean, I don't know if these people are still there now. Volker Popp studied ethnology, African and Islamic studies, Turkology, and Iranian studies at Mainz, Frankfurt, Ankara, Tehran. For many years, resident in Turkey, Kuwait, and the UAE, helped to build up collections in museums in Kuwait, Qatar, and Riyadh. So these people are familiar with the area. They're not anti anything except falsity. Christoph Luxemburg, which is not his real name, studied Semitic studies, Germanic studies, and history, doctoral dissertation about Syriac manuscript. For many years, teacher of Arabic and Aramaic. He was famous a few years ago for the revelation that the 72 virgins that you get in paradise if you're a martyr was actually a misconception, and the real translation from the Syriac was 72 white grapes. Do you remember that came in a few years ago? That they weren't virgins; they were white grapes. It was pure white, and it was interpreted as being virgin. And I'll explain why the interpretations are so easy to make. Here's a person, Peter von Sivers, came across him in 2017, and he was from Brigham Young University, which is in Utah, which is very, very Mormon. He emphasizes the Christian, Arab, and Persian kingdoms that arose out of the disputes over the Trinity and the 200-year gap before the emergence of Islam. Later, he is now associated with the Inara school, and I've got a picture here. You can watch his YouTube, and he goes into the story about the prophet and the conquering hero, and he tells the students, well, now that I've told you all that, I have to tell you, that's not what happened. That's religion. That's not history. And then he goes into the actual history that he refers to the names of the Arab kings pre-Islam. Okay. What these scholars do is say that you cannot rely on any Islamic source. You have to rely on epigraphic evidence. And what that means is coins, metal coins, and inscriptions written on stone. Okay? Because uh, documents written on paper can be copied, can be fabricated. But evidence of coins, and Volker-Pop particularly is a numismatist, which means a person who studies coins. And this here is an inscription of Muawiyah, who was the Arab leader. He was the first Arab after the independence from the Romans and the Persians. The Arabs set up their own kingdom. He was the first king, and he took over Jerusalem and the entire remaining parts of the former Roman and Persian empires. Now, that inscription is on a bathhouse, and it's written in Greek, and it's dated, and it starts with a cross. This is a Greek inscription of Muawiyah on the baths of Gadara with a date following the era of the Arabians. And the reason is this tells you a lot. And here is the English translation of what that Greek says. In the days of Muawiyah, servant of God, leader of the protectors, hot baths were preserved and renovated by the counselor, Abdullah, son of Basimos, on the 5th of December, on the second day of the week in the 6th year of the indiction, in the year 726 from the founding of the city, and the year 42 following the Arabs, which would be 622, for the healing of the sick under the supervision of Johannes, magistrate of Gadara. Now, the importance of that, it gives you a cross-reference between the dates, okay? It's evidence of dates. And he refers to the Roman year, and he refers to the Arab year, okay? And the year following of the Arabs. When the Arabs started their kingdom, they started a new calendar. You know, they used to have a new calendar date for every king. So he refers to the year 42 of the Arabs. Now, later, of course, this become year 42 of the Islamic calendar. But when it was started, it wasn't an Islamic calendar. It was a calendar of the Arabs, the Christian Arabs. Note, Roman-style Christian Arab administration. No mention of an Arab prophet, no Islam, no Hijrah, cross-reference of 3 dating systems. Okay, so for an archaeologist and a numismatist, this is gold because you can see the dates of different coins and you can date them in different schema. Okay, Moawiyah. So now we're getting on to coins, which are actual evidence of what happened when. Because to be on a coin, you have to have a power. Not anyone can make coins. You have to have some position of authority, and you write the date on the coin, and what appears on the coin gives evidence of who was in power at that time. Okay, now I've got here on the left the year in our dating period, CE, and on the left the year of the Arabs. Here's a list of the coins and the dates on them and where they came from and what it says on them. The first coins bearing the name of Muawiyah are minted in Jarabjurd in Persia. Okay, so the empire of Muawiyah wasn't in Jerusalem. It encompassed the entire area of Persia, and that was where the first coin bearing his name was found. In 28, Muawiyah is referenced by this date by the Byzantine historian. Okay, so we've got a cross-reference with Byzantine history there for this person. Now, here we come to the most controversial bit, most difficult for our Muslim friends to deal with. First coin bearing the inscription Muhammad is from Shirajan, which is a Persian city. It bears the inscription Muhammad. What does that mean? Coin struck in Palestine bears the inscription Muhammad, this is in 658, with a figure depicted carrying a cross. Okay, so we've got the word Muhammad on a coin, and it's got a cross on the coin. 641. Coin bears the name Muawiyah in Darabjurd, and the title, the leader is called Leader of the Protectors, Amir al-Munminin. So they give themselves a title, which is not a king, Leader of the Protectors, corresponding to what the original military force of the Arab kingdom were protectors of the border of the empire. 1670, we've got a coin with Muawiyah with a cross. A coin in 52 bearing the inscription Muhammad from Ray near Tehran. Now, here's what actually happened. We know that Muawiyah attacked Constantinople. He had control of the Syrian navy. He thought he could conquer. They'd been trying to conquer Constantinople for years, but it was so well defended they didn't, and he couldn't. And he didn't succeed because the Romans or the Byzantines had fire ships. So whatever, they had some weapon where they could project fire onto the Arab ships and sank them. So they had a superior, they had superior weapons. So that's why it's definitely history. The Arabs attacked Constantinople, but it's always referred to the Muslims attacked. Well, they were Arabs, but they weren't Muslims, but they did attack. But that was the end, because of his failure, that was the end of Muawiyah. The last record of him is an inscription in Taif in Arabia, refers to the year 58, and he's commander of the faithful. And still, even though in Arabia, there's no mention of either a prophet or of Islam. Now, let's look at this word, Muhammad. It appears on the coins. So that you see the letters M, H, M, D. Yeah, that's an M and that's an M. So you see there's two M's there, so it corresponds to the M and that corresponds to the M. I wanted just to tell you something about the Arabic. Not that I know much about it, but when it's basically consonants, they leave out the vowels. Okay, so that's why. But they have diacritical marks. Someone might know better than correct me, but because there's no vowels in the writing, it was more or less like a mnemonic, and so that's why it's so subject to interpretation, because you can, if you insert different vowels, you can make the word mean anything. That's the whole difficulty, because the Quran is written in this type of code without diacritical marks, so it's interpreted to mean what Islamic scholars want it to mean. Now, this inscription first appears in Persia, not Arabia. It predates any reference to the Arab prophet, and it's an honorific, meaning the praised one. Who is the praised one in Christianity? Jesus is the praised one. The Persians were Christians, put the praised one on their coins. The praised one was Muhammad. Now, I want to go down to some more coins because I've got a particular personal connection to one of them. You can find coins in catalogs. Okay, now this is a description of a coin, a picture of one. Now you can see it's got the word Muhammad here, and so is this one, and it's got a cross. This is one side and this is the other side. Okay, so you've got the word Muhammad here and you've got a cross. What they say in the catalogue: standing emperor, 660s, square. Muhammad left of standing figure, cross above, below cursive. Nice strike without any weakness. Foss is an authority, has suggested a date range 647, but in my opinion, 660s. This could be the earliest Islamic coin to bear the name Muhammad in Arabic, which appears on silver drachms in H66 of the year Abd al-Malik. This is the most attractive example of this rare type we've seen. So this is a catalogue of coins, and even it describes them as Islamic, even though because they've got Muhammad on it, but there's got obviously Christian crosses. Well, if you want to sell a coin, you don't go into all the historical narrative too much, I guess. Let's look at Abd al-Malik. He was the second attested leader, definite leader. His name, he was the successor to Muawiyah after he failed in his attack on Constantinople. A coin bears his name in the year 60 of the Arabs. Again, in Darabjurd, in 679, a visit to Jerusalem describes coins with crosses. By the way, this is well after the so-called Arab Islamic conquest. 666, the first coin inscription, Muhammad Rasul Allah, means Muhammad, servant of God. That appears on the coins. Inscription from a canal bridge in Egypt has no mention of Muhammad, Quran, or Islam. 689, work begins on the Dome of the Rock under Abd al-Malik. He orders the construction of the Dome of the Rock and is on the site of the Jewish temple. 66, earliest coin with mention of Muhammad as Rasul. Okay, Muhammad as Rasul is an apostle, messenger. Okay, so the description of Jesus has changed from servant of God to apostle or messenger of God. Okay, now there was a civil war, I do believe, and that Abd al-Malik then controlled Arabia. In 74, gold and silver with Muhammad Rasul appear in the east of the empire. In 77, there were eschatological parousia. It means they expected the second coming of Jesus. And in this time, the first coins minted without a sovereign bearing Shahada. I think the Shahada means that there's no prophet but Muhammad and Muhammad is his messenger. A coin from Merv names Abd al-Malik as Marwan. So one of the Islamic caliphs is called Marwan, but Pop suggests that this was just an alternative name for the well-known Abd al-Malik. Now, the Dome of the Rock, still there today. Okay, there's an inscription inside the Dome of the Rock, and apparently you can't see it anymore, but this is what it says. People of the book, do not transgress the bounds of your religion. Speak nothing but the truth about your God. Jesus, son of Mary, was no more than God's apostle, and his word, which he cast to Mary, a spirit from him. So believe in God and his apostles. Do not say three. Forbear, and it shall be better for you. God is but one God. God forbid that he should have a son. He is all that the heavens and earth contain, God and all the sufficient protector. The significance of that, one, it was a response to Heraclius, who just after his victory in Constantinople, he reignited the whole controversy over the Trinity by stating his version of the Trinity in the cathedral in Constantinople. And the Arabs said, no, do not say three. So the original Dome of the Rock, it was actually built in the form of a Zoroastrian temple with an outer and inner sanctum. But the words on there were obviously an anti-Trinitarian response to the Romans saying, no, we don't want your Trinity anymore. We're sick of it. We do not say three. But the other significance of that is that it's reprinted almost verbatim in the Quran. Here's another a gold coin. It shows Abd al-Malik, a depiction of a ruler, apocalyptic Jesus with a flame sword, and Jewish religious symbols of the stone. Okay, so what Pop says is that the eschatological beliefs were that Jesus was going to come back as a conqueror with a flame sword, and he was obviously going to be welcomed by the returning Jesus because he's printed coins in his honor. Here's a coin. This coin doesn't contain the word Muhammad, but it does have a Christian cross there with an orb there. What does it say? Arab Byzantine, crowned, insert facing, imitation, Kufic script, sold for £120. What it says on the coin about it is it came from Emesa, which is now called Homs, which unfortunately has been pretty well reduced to rubble by the war in Syria. It's in Arabic and Greek script. It has a figure with a cross and a globe cross. M denotes 40 numina. Kufic exerg means good. The exerg is that thing at the bottom. It means the underscript. And it's just for the time of Abd al-Malik. And the reason why I mention this is that it was sold for £120 and I bought it and I've got it at home. I've got a relic. It's an Arab coin with a Christian cross. You would think it would be more valuable than £120 because, I mean, the significance is that it shows that the Arabs weren't Muslims. If they were, they wouldn't put Christian crosses on their coins. But this is just a summary of the coins and where they came from and what they say. Going right to the bottom, first coin that was minted in Mecca isn't till the year 201 of the Arabs. So you would have thought that being the center of the universe as far as Islam was concerned, the Arab, someone in Medina might have minted a coin at some stage. No, they didn't. Here's the east-west progression of coins, and that gives you evidence of how this religion, as featured on the coin, spread west. That does correspond with the earlier map showing the spread of Islam to the west. But at that time, it wasn't what we now know as Islam. Coins indicate who held power when and the religious ideology they proclaim. The first coins of a new Arab-Persian entity are minted in Persia. The first use of the word Muhammad appears in Persia, in Pahlavi script, that is the Persian script. So Muhammad came from Persia. I'm not sure it was a Persian word, but it first appeared in a Persian coin. So documentary evidence of the coins spread shows the spread west up to Cordoba in the year 98, which is a very rapid spread. And that's one of the miracles claimed for Islam, but it was miraculous that the will of Allah allowed it to spread so rapidly. Well, it did, but it wasn't the will of Allah that did it, and it wasn't the God. May have been called Allah because that was the Arab word for God. I'm putting this slide in because I went to the British Museum and looked at their Arab Islamic section to see what they said, and the coin was removed. So whether they had taken the coin and were considering whether it was really under the name Islamic at the year 622. Actually, it wasn't Islamic in 622, definitely not. But that's the official narrative. How did this myth arise about the victorious Arab prophet? Well, the Arabs needed a prophet of their own to go with their new religion and empire. The original meaning of the word Muhammad was lost. It was on the coins. So they had a lot of old coins with the word Muhammad on it. Pre-independence Arab military detachment, the Federati, Quraysh became Quraysh, the tribe of Muhammad. The term Amir al-Munimin on coins, leader of the protectors, became commander of the faithful. So this is the idea, the evolution of the concept of religious figure of Jesus evolves into a commander, as in the conquering hero. The Arab military protectors, now maintaining order in the new empire, could later give rise to the impression that an invasion from Arabia had occurred. Okay, so you had Arabs riding around on horses with swords, and people might have got the impression that they'd come from Arabia, but no, they were already there. They were a military outfit which was already there. They didn't come from Arabia. The Quran itself speaks of many prophets. It was rendered into Arabic. It was not difficult for the concept of an Arab prophet myth could only be constructed long after. You couldn't construct a present-day myth. If you wanted to construct such a myth, you would have to wait 200 years to come up with a story. Going back to my earlier premise, we have to respect the truth. We need to respect the truth even more now than we ever did. There's not a post-truth, post-modernist world. All religions are based on premises known to be false. This is my sentimental outburst. Religions hamper process, cause suffering. Critical evaluation of religion cannot be abandoned. An alternative to Arab history can be constructed based entirely on evidence, not dogma. In other words, it is possible to have a real history. We don't have to have a history that's dominated by pious Islamic scholars, because that's not history. Western historians have been generally ambivalent, disingenuous, and negligent. Absolutely. Tom Holland, how can you be a historian? And, you have abandoned your cause, mate. You should look at history and say what it says. Only the German scholars are prepared. Well, of course, one reason why they don't, because they're concerned about the health and safety. They don't want to get bumped off by saying that Islam is fake and Muhammad never exists. They're scared. Okay, I get it. They're scared. Well, I'm not scared. I don't think anyone's going to bump me off. No one takes any notice of me. I just want to quote from Volker. It's in page 90 of his 213 work, 2013. He's talking about the narrative about the Arab prophet. These events are not historic in the European or American tradition of historiography. In the spirit of respect for religious feelings, easement of fanatics, and tolerance for the narrators of a special history, a tacit agreement seems to be in force amongst Western historians who refrain from applying the usual standard procedures when it comes to the history of the Middle East after the year 622, commonly and erroneously labeled Islamic history. The term Muslim appears very late. In this field, academic requirements and scientific skepticism have apparently been replaced by the uncritical adoption of narratives comparable of those of the Arabian Nights. So this is one historian calling them out, saying, look, what you're talking about is just as fanciful as the myths of the Arabian Nights, which are known to be myths. So that's the story. There is a real history. No one's prepared to accept or listen to it. But what I've said today is what the evidence shows to be the history. And the entire 2 billion people in the world that follow the religion of Islam, I guess it would be just too difficult for them to accept the reality that their worshipped hero is completely and utterly fake. But that is the fact. So what can I say? I've said it. Thank you very much. All right. Well, before we go into questions, we better have a little bit of a collection if anyone's got any contributions to make, because we do want to thank the Charians for letting us use the hall. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I've got a question. I've got my hand up, John.
Okay, Les.
So my question, John, is, and thanks for another really interesting talk, John. I think I heard a similar thing maybe a couple of years ago, and I never tire of listening to the true history of Islam. So my question, John, is, with these historical scholars and the Germans, Vop, What's been the reaction, the express reaction from the chief Islamic scholars around the world? Have they said anything? Have any fatwas been issued against any of these scholars?
Well, I think the general reaction has been totally to ignore them and just say, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you're not a Muslim. We know what's true and you don't. So they just have a religious dogmatic rejection, and they're not worried by any historical narrative that contradicts it because they're just so wedded to their faith. So they just ignore it, which is what you'd expect. But what you wouldn't expect is the genuine historians to not act according to their professional duty, which is what they're not doing.
Thanks, John.
Somebody else?
Yeah, I was going to say that at a basic level, simply disputing an argument because it doesn't sound right doesn't always work. You can bring up a huge amount of examples in history. I could say L. Ron Hubbard was a myth. I mean, I read the story of L. Ron Hubbard and the Sea Org and all that stuff, and I thought, this reads like fiction. I can't believe it. So I on purely rational grounds, I can't reject the idea of Muhammad's rise to power and the creation of Islam. There might be inaccuracies, I agree, but I can't dispel the whole story. Thank you.
I can only go back to, how do we know what is right in history? It's getting much more difficult because people are denying the things that did happen. I think if we look at facts that we can rely on as evidence, why can't we do that? And if the facts that we can find contradict myths, we can discard the myths. Shouldn't be terribly difficult, as long as we can agree. Well, first of all, we need to agree on what's a fact, which is a problem because people deny facts. But if we do accept the facts, then we should be able to reject things that contradict the facts.
Well, usually they rely on corroboration.
Yes.
Yeah, but it needs to be contemporary corroboration, because if the myth has already developed, then the other people, the other kingdom, nation, empire, in responding to that happening or person, they can have already accepted the myth as history. And that's what they think happened with Troy. There was already a myth that spread, so everybody related and treated the myth as history. And then when we had a session about how the Romans conquering Jerusalem,
yeah,
in one of our historical sessions, and we looked up all the different ancient Greek and Roman historians, and Josephus and all those people, and every one of them had a different version. And I mean, some of them the conqueror of Jerusalem was General Pompey, and some of them didn't even have him going to Judea. They said, that wasn't mentioned. He was in Syria, and then he went up north to the Black Sea to Colchis, and then so each one has got a different version. That's what you're up against. I mean, you might never be able to find the truth in history.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think that the coins are important, because those German scholars, they are only relying on the coins, and they're trying to date things based on the coins. And that's the archaeological evidence. But, if you're using that as best you can, that should be the most reliable way of doing it. The thing is that, you know, if you're relying on something that is, you know, is a myth, like we know that the historical basis of the Bible, Adam and Eve, is a myth. So I agree with the proposition that you can't rely on any religious document as evidence of what happened in the religion. You have to look at independent documents from outside of religion to find out what happened, what actually happened, because the religious sources just can't be trusted. I don't trust them.
Doesn't that apply to any ideology, whether religious or not?
Well, it doesn't apply to science because scientific evidence is a different category. It's verifiable evidence and consistent with the reason. But I think archaeological evidence and what they call epigraphic evidence, the inscriptions and the coins, that is the most reliable thing. I mean, yeah, there's probably all sorts of different interpretations. And some of those Arab scrolls, I really wonder, you know, if they're using their imagination to some extent to express their version. I don't know, but it seems more plausible to me because they back it up with the coins. That's why I got a coin, because I think it's an important relic. I mean, if you're a pious Muslim, how can you explain the fact that an Arab coin has got a Christian cross on it?
Because they were Christian Arabs.
I know they're Christian Arabs, but that's not consistent. The narrative, according to the Islamic history, is that Muhammad was a conqueror.
He didn't convert absolutely everybody.
Well, if he was a conqueror, well, he can't have just been some wandering freak, because he was supposed to have been a conqueror. He had power. He had power and control. The caliphs were the kings. According to them, they weren't just mystics. Caliphs were kings.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that to my understanding, you've got the Jews, you've got the Christians. They had developed a high degree of scholarly ability over the centuries. Now, I mean, according to the legend, Muhammad was unlettered, and apparently there weren't many outstanding scribes in that corner of Arabia. So you got these Arabs racing around. We're not dealing at first with the most proficient academic minds in the world. That came later. And that could be the source of much of the confusion.
Well, anyway, if you want to cling to the myth of Muhammad as being a real person, you have to face a whole lot of contradictions about, yes, for example, how did people write down his every movement and his every thought and deed, you know, as if they were going around with a tape recorder? Didn't happen, did it?
No, they had powers of memory before writing became common. People had an ability, they used poetry to remember information.
Yeah, well, they were privy to his discussions with his wife, so I think it's more drama than you know, history. I think we better call it quits. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, next month we've got another controversial one. It's Michael Sherlock. His topic is wokeism, New Age religion. So yeah, I think you'll have a few points maybe points of contention to raise on that next month. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.